Ireland moves in quiet ways on early mornings. Gray light drifting over wet pavements. Buses humming through small towns still half asleep. Rain threading across windows like someone thinking softly. It's the kind of place where strangers become familiar without ever saying a word. ESFP warmth enters the world like a spark. Bright, casual, unguarded, touching without thinking, laughing without meaning more than the moment. INFP feeling folds inward, soft, observant, hopeful in the gentle ways that make one small kindness feel like a promise. And somewhere between Drogheda and Dublin, on a bus that always starts empty, two lives brushed too close. One leaning without meaning it, the other catching the weight like a secret. This is Men Being Too Intimate, Season 2. The Boy Who Slept Against Me. Rowan never meant to notice him, not really. It just happened the way small things do, quietly, gradually, without asking permission. Most mornings, the first stop crowd was the same handful of people. A pensioner with a canvas tote, a mother with school bags, two lads who always whispered about football. And him, the half-asleep boy in the hoodie. He boarded the 7:30 like the morning was too early for his soul to fully arrive, headphones around his neck. Hair pushed back in a way that looked unintentional but unfairly good. He always sat near the window, dropped into the seat with a soft thud, and closed his eyes before the bus even pulled away. Rowan didn't know his name, didn't know his job or his story or anything that would justify the familiarity building in his chest. He only knew they always caught the same first stop bus, and somehow that was enough to turn a stranger into a quiet part of Rowan's routine. Some mornings the bus was full enough that Rowan sat in a different row. Some mornings he found himself 2 seats behind, pretending not to look too long at the way the boy's hoodie bunched at his shoulder. Some mornings they were side by side, never touching, never speaking, never anything, but close enough for Rowan to feel a soft awareness settle beneath his ribs. He didn't know when the noticing began, only that he noticed now, and then came the morning it all tilted. The day the seat beside him was empty, and Rowan, without thinking, stepped into a moment that would follow him far longer than the bus ride itself. Cian didn't overthink mornings. He never had the energy. Most days he stumbled out of the house barely awake, hoodie half-zipped, coffee forgotten on the counter. The 7:30 bus was just something he survived on the way to Dublin. Sit down, close his eyes, hope he didn't snore. That was the whole routine, except there was this lad. Quiet, neat, always with that soft, thoughtful expression. A familiar face Cian couldn't place the first few times, then slowly began to recognize in the fuzzy blur between sleep and wakefulness. They always got on together at the first stop. Cian didn't know why that made him feel steadier. Just did. Some mornings the guy sat behind him. Some mornings across the aisle, sometimes right beside him when the bus got crowded. Always calm, always polite. A presence that made the morning feel a bit less brutal. Shane didn't know his name either, but he knew his vibe. Gentle, quiet, probably smarter than him, probably smelled nice too. Not that he'd ever admit noticing that. He wasn't thinking about anything deep this particular morning. Just tired, just cold, just wanting a seat. So when he climbed aboard and saw the bus nearly empty, he slid into his usual window spot with a sigh, pulled his hood up, let himself sink. He didn't even notice the quiet boy board behind him. Not until a small shift, a presence settling beside him, closer than usual. Cian felt a tiny spark of surprise, not bad surprise, the warm kind. The kind that made the morning feel a little brighter for no reason he wanted to inspect. He opened his eyes for a second, saw him sit a little carefully, like he didn't want to disturb anything. Cian meant to say hi, meant to smile, meant to at least pretend to be awake. But the bus hummed, the rain blurred the windows, the warmth of another person beside him eased something inside his chest, and Cian's head drifted before he could stop it. He didn't even realize it landed on someone's shoulder. All he knew was, for the first time in weeks, sleep felt safe. Rowan didn't plan to sit beside him. He just moved with the morning. The bus was nearly empty, rain soft against the windows. Cian was already there in his usual seat, hood up, forehead leaning against the glass. The seat beside him, usually taken, usually safe, was open. Rowan hesitated only long enough to feel his pulse once. Then he sat, not close, not hopeful. Just beside him. Cian didn't stir at first. He seemed deeper in sleep than usual, shoulders loose, breathing slow. Rowan tried to look out the window to pretend this was ordinary and unremarkable. But then, a subtle shift, a quiet inhale, the tiniest brush of fabric. Cian's head tipped, just a little at first, then more, until the weight of him came to rest gently against Rowan's shoulder. A warmth that wasn't meant for him. A closeness that felt like a dream. A moment Rowan knew he'd think about far longer than he wanted to. He kept still, even his breath careful. Outside, the Irish fields blurred into soft, muted greens. Inside, everything was suddenly louder. Cian's slow breathing. The quiet thud of Rowan's heartbeat. The strange comfort of being leaned on by someone who never meant anything by it. Rowan didn't move. He didn't dare. He let Cian rest, even though it hurt in a way he couldn't name. And somewhere inside he knew he would remember this morning, long after Cian forgot it. Rowan stepped off the bus with legs that didn't feel entirely like his own. The warmth of Cian's head had lingered long after it lifted, a ghost sensation on his shoulder. A memory forming too fast. Too much for a morning that wasn't supposed to mean anything. He told himself to breathe, to walk to work, to forget. But instead, he watched. Cian headed not toward the stops or the crosswalk, but toward the small café beside the station, the one with the fogged-up windows and the smell of roasted beans drifting into the cold. Rowan had never followed anyone like this, never wanted to, never dared. But something in him, something sparked awake by the weight of another person, moved before thought could stop it. He slipped inside the café after Cian. Quiet, cautious, hoping not to be noticed, Cian stood at the counter rubbing sleep from his face, ordering in a voice still warm with morning. Rowan stayed a careful step behind, pretending to read the menu, while his eyes kept drifting to the profile he already knew too well. Cian ordered something simple, something soft. A flat white with oat milk. Rowan didn't even hesitate. When it was his turn, he said, voice low, almost embarrassed, "Same as his, please." The barista nodded. 2 cups, 2 names to call. But Rowan didn't know his yet. He'd only had routine, familiarity, and a morning that shifted something in him. The cups appeared on the counter, steam curling upward. The barista called out, "Cian!" and Rowan froze. Not because the name was unusual, but because hearing it felt too intimate, too close. Too much like something he wasn't meant to hold. Cian collected his cup with a small, soft smile to the barista. He didn't see Rowan, didn't know he was there, didn't know anything had changed. But for Rowan, everything had. He whispered the name once under his breath as if testing it, and the moment settled in his chest, like something both precious and dangerous. Rowan spent the morning pretending to work. His screen glowed with half-finished layouts, but all he could think about was the warmth on his shoulder, the quiet weight of someone trusting him enough to lean. Every time he moved his arm, his body remembered it, that unintentional closeness. That borrowed moment. His coworkers joked about deadlines, about the rain, about lunch. Rowan nodded, smiled, tried to stay in the present. But the morning kept returning to him, like a tide pulling gently at his thoughts. He caught himself writing one name. In the corner of his notebook. Cian. He erased it quickly. But the feeling stayed. Cian's day was louder, faster. Filled with customers, coworkers, deliveries, the usual rush of Dublin streets. Cian was restocking jackets in the back when his coworker Sean wandered in, chewing gum like he had nothing else to do. Sean leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "So did you catch today, or what?" Cian blinked. "Who?" Sean rolled his eyes. "The one on your bus." Cian groaned, dragging a hand down his face. "Man, I passed out on the bus, nearly headbutted the poor lad." "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, you're hopeless." Sean shoved Cian's arm. "When are you gonna make a move, man? You're acting like a 12-year-old with a crush." Cian laughed, embarrassed, pink spreading across his ears. "I'm not chicken, all right? I just don't want to be weird." Sean scoffed loud enough for the whole shop. "You're weird anyway. Ask out, you muppet." Cian tried to shove him back, but Sean dodged. "I will, someday." Sean cackled. "Aye, someday." "Man'll be 80 before he says hello." Cian muttered, "Feck off." But he was smiling, the shy, quiet kind he never let many people see. After that, he didn't think about the morning again. Not for long, but sometimes mid-conversation. His head drifted in a small, instinctive tilt, like he still expected someone to be there beside him. Someone steady, someone soft. He shook it off. He didn't think deeply about mornings, or about commuters he sat near. He lived in the movement, the warmth, the now, except every so often, when the memory flickered back, he felt safe. He didn't question why. Rowan Byrne always took the evening bus home. Same route, same timing, same quiet window view of Dublin slipping past. And though he'd seen Cian O'Donnell before, in morning rush hours and fast glimpses in passing rows, they had never once returned on the same bus. Different schedules, different days, different timing. Until tonight. The rain had shifted everything: traffic, shoppers, work hours. And when Rowan stepped onto the bus, shaking water from his sleeves, he moved with the slow line of tired commuters, unaware. Until he looked up. And there he was. Cian in the window seat, head tilted toward the glass, half asleep already, hoodie pulled tight, hair damp from the drizzle and pushed back clumsily, like he jogged to catch the bus. Rowan stopped breathing for a second, not out of shock, but from the quiet, strange sense of, oh, you exist outside mornings. He didn't choose the seat beside Cian. The line simply moved that way. The bus rolled into the wet Dublin streets, yellow lights smearing across the windows. Rowan kept his eyes forward, but he couldn't unnotice the small things. Cian's slow, steady breathing, the way his fingers twitched when the bus jolted, the faint scent of rain and wool from his hoodie. Then, a bump in the road nudged Cian's head into the window. He half woke, blinked, shifted back toward the cold glass. Rowan looked away. Then, the bus curved left. This time, Cian drifted toward Rowan, head brushing Rowan's shoulder, before lifting again. As Cian instinctively corrected himself, Rowan bit down on a breath, and then, the one that didn't correct? The bus hit the brakes at a crowded stop. Cian's body leaned in with the motion, and this time he didn't move back. His head landed fully on Rowan's shoulder. Rowan didn't dare blink. He didn't lean in. He didn't take anything. He just let the moment rest against him. Cian's hand slipped onto Rowan's thigh, his weight settling fully, trustingly, as if Rowan's shoulder had always been meant for him. Rowan didn't move at first. Didn't breathe. Didn't dare disturb the moment. But after a few beats, after feeling the heaviness of Cian's sleep, Rowan realized something small. Cian's neck was bent at a strange angle, a little too sharp, a little uncomfortable, so Rowan shifted, just barely. A gentle roll of his shoulder, a careful tilt of his posture, slow enough not to wake him, soft enough that no one else would notice. Cian's weight followed naturally, falling into a better curve, more comfortable, more held. Rowan felt the difference immediately. Cian's breathing eased. His hand relaxed on Rowan's thigh. His forehead brushed the side of Rowan's neck, as if settling into the perfect place to sleep. Rowan stared out the window again, heart aching, in that quiet, private way only one-sided longing ever teaches. He didn't take more. He didn't imagine more. He just made sure. Cian slept well, for a moment that would mean nothing to Cian, and far too much to him. Cian O'Donnell woke up slowly, the way someone does when sleep has fully claimed them, and the world feels a little too bright. Rowan Byrne felt the moment before he saw it. The shift in weight, the faint inhale, the warmth lifting off his shoulder. Cian straightened with a quiet grunt, blinking hard, scrubbing a hand down his face. A tiny sound escaped him, a soft, sleepy slurp, as he wiped the corner of his mouth, half embarrassed, half still dreaming. Rowan kept his gaze fixed on the front of the bus, fighting the need to look at him, to memorize the exact shape of this moment. Cian blinked again, finally noticing the space between them. His eyes flicked to Rowan's shoulder, to the faint impression of where his head had rested, and then he froze. Cian's gaze dropped to his own hand, still lying, very comfortably, on Rowan's thigh. A beat, just long enough for something like, "Ah, shite," to flash across his face. His hand shot back so fast he smacked his knuckles on the seat divider. "Jesus, sorry, man." A panicked little whisper shout. He shook out his hand, mortified, cheeks turning a soft pink beneath the bus lights. Rowan folded his hands together. Calm on the outside. Nowhere near calm on the inside. The bus hummed forward, carrying both of them in silence again, but not the same kind as before. The rest of the bus ride passed in a strange, quiet tension. Cian O'Donnell tried to pretend nothing had happened. Rowan Byrne tried to pretend he wasn't replaying everything in his mind. Their elbows stayed carefully apart. Their knees never touched again. Cian kept wiping the corner of his mouth in tiny, embarrassed little gestures. When the bus slowed for their stop, both men stood. The aisle was tight. They ended up close. Too close. Rowan slightly ahead, Cian behind him. Rowan shifted forward to give space. That's when it happened. Cian saw it. A small, unmistakable damp patch on Rowan's sweater. Right at the shoulder, where Cian's head had been. Cian's eyes went huge. He lifted a hand and tapped Rowan's arm. A soft, urgent, please look kind of tap. Mate, Cian whispered, horrified, tilting his head toward Rowan's shoulder. Rowan glanced down, startled. Cian slapped a hand over his own face. Ah, for feck's sake, I drooled on you? Rowan shook his head, gentle. It's fine. It's not fine, Cian hissed, mortified. Cian dropped his hands helplessly. I owe you something for that, at least a drink, a full pint. He pointed at Rowan's shoulder like it was a crime scene. Rowan blinked. A drink? Aye, Cian said, cheeks pink. That bright, easy smile returning but softer now. Come on, I'm buying. The bus doors opened. Cool night air spilling in. Rowan stepped off first, heart lifting in a way he wasn't ready to admit. Cian followed beside him, nudging his elbow lightly. All right, man, he said with that warm Irish charm. Rowan nodded, trying not to fall for what wasn't meant. Deadly pub's this way, and Rowan, still warm from the softness he shouldn't have felt, walked with him into a night. The pub was warm the way Irish pubs always are. Glowing lamps, worn wood, soft chatter. A little pocket of safety from the cold. Cian O'Donnell ordered 2 pints like they were old friends. Still can't believe I drooled on ya. He shook his head, laughing into his elbow. Rowan Byrne smiled without meaning to. It wasn't that bad. It was, Cian insisted. But thanks for letting me buy ya a peace-offering pint. They clinked glasses. For a little while it was easy. Cian talked about work. Customers from hell, deliveries gone wrong. A lad who tried to return a jacket after wearing it on a stag weekend. Rowan laughed more than he expected to. There was something bright about Cian. Something alive. Something that made the room feel lighter. Cian leaned back in his chair, stretching. You're sound, man. You know that? Don't usually talk this much to strangers. Rowan's heart tugged. I'm glad you did, Cian smiled. The kind of smile that made Rowan believe in impossible things, but then Cian's eyes flicked toward the bar, just for a moment, barely more than a glance. Rowan followed it without thinking. A girl stood there, dark hair, bright laugh, talking to the bartender as she waited for her order. Cian looked away quickly. Workmate? Rowan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Cian shook his head, cheeks warming. No, just... He gestured vaguely. She gets the same bus sometimes. Rowan swallowed. The bus? Cian laughed once, awkward. Been sitting behind her for weeks, trying to say something, but I'm a feckin' coward. Rowan felt something inside him tilt. Not sharply. Not dramatically. Just enough to hurt. Cian didn't notice. He was watching the girl. Watching her laugh, watching her shoulder brush someone else's arm. Rowan looked at his pint, at the foam settling, at the reflection of a moment that had never truly belonged to him. Cian cleared his throat, forcing his gaze away. Anyway, he lifted his glass. Rowan lifted his pint with a small, practiced smile, and Rowan swallowed the ache with the beer, letting the warmth blur the edges of disappointment. The second pint loosened Cian's shoulders and softened Rowan's edges, just enough to pretend everything was fine. But the truth hovered. In the glances. In the pauses. In the way Cian couldn't quite stop looking toward the bar. Rowan noticed. Of course he did. And Cian finally cracked. He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. All right, real talk. Rowan set his glass down gently. Cian nodded stiffly, then flicked his eyes toward the bar again. You're, better with words than me. He gestured vaguely. Quiet lads always are. So how do I, talk to her? Rowan blinked. Oh. Cian didn't hear the weight in it. He was chewing the inside of his cheek, anxious and excited. I'm hopeless with women, swear to God. He dropped his head into his hand. Been sitting behind her on the bus for weeks, thinking, this is the day, Cian, you'll say something. And then I fall asleep like a feckin' toddler. Rowan stared at the table for a moment, collecting himself, smoothing out the pieces so he didn't bleed all over the floor. You want advice? Rowan asked softly. Cian lifted his head, hopeful. Yeah, please. Rowan took a breath, then forced a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Well, he sipped his pint, thinking. Drool on her. Cian froze. Drool on her? Rowan nodded, face completely serious. Worked on me. Cian choked on his beer. Jesus Christ, Rowan. Rowan finally cracked a smile. A pint after and maybe she'd forgive you. Cian shook his head, laughing hard, hand on his chest. A pint and drool, that's your grand romantic strategy? Rowan shrugged. Could get you a date. Could get you slapped. 50-50. Cian slapped the table. Might as well flip a coin, you bastard. Rowan laughed, quiet and warm and aching. Cian grinned at him, eyes bright. All right, tell you what. If I actually try it, I'll update ya. Rowan swallowed. Please do. Cian looked toward the girl again, thumb rubbing his lower lip in that same nervous way. Not tonight, though. He exhaled sharply. Feck me. I'm not drunk enough for heartbreak. Rowan's heart stuttered in his chest. Neither am I, he thought, but smiled instead. We should head out, Rowan said. Yeah, Cian agreed, grabbing his jacket. Thanks, man. Felt good talking to ya. Rowan nodded. The night air hit Rowan softly. Dublin in the rain always felt like a pause. Between one feeling and the next, Cian walked beside him for a block, hands in his hoodie pockets, bouncing lightly on his heels, as if he still had leftover energy from laughing in the pub. Rowan matched his pace, because it was easier than not. At the corner, Cian slowed. This is me, he said, nodding down a side street. Well, thanks again. Rowan managed a small smile. Can't believe that's your big plan. Use it wisely. Oh, I won't, Cian laughed. No woman deserves that. See you around, yeah? Cian said. Yeah, Rowan replied quietly. See you. Cian gave a casual salute and jogged off. Rowan watched him turn the corner and disappear, then he exhaled. He didn't replay the whole night. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't let himself crumble. He just felt it. The way Cian leaned on him without knowing. The way that closeness had lit something soft inside him. The way Cian's crush had blown it out like a candle. Rowan tucked his hands deeper in his pockets. His shoulders curled subtly inward. That's the thing about falling for a straight person. The heartbreak isn't sharp. It isn't loud. It's soft. A whisper more than a wound. A small bruise under the ribs that only hurts when pressed. Rowan didn't press it, he just walked home through the rain, letting the night settle around him, like a blanket he didn't ask for. Some stories don't unfold the way we imagine. Some moments begin with warmth on a shoulder, a shared bus ride, a quiet laugh in a pub, and end with nothing more than a soft ache. And the sound of rain on the walk home, Rowan didn't fall in love? Not really. He fell into a feeling, the kind that rises quickly and dissolves just as quietly. Cian didn't break his heart. He simply didn't see it, and maybe that was always the point, because not every connection becomes romance. Not every closeness turns into a confession, and sometimes the best thing two people can be is a small, unexpected part of each other's ordinary day. Maybe Rowan and Cian will meet again. Maybe they'll share another pint, another laugh, another sleepy bus ride. Not as almost somethings, but as something steadier, something gentle, something without ache. A friendship, unexpected, unasked for, but maybe exactly right. The ESFP and the INFP, one living in the moment, one feeling beyond it. This was men being too intimate. The boy who slept against me. If this moment stayed with you, listen to more from gay audiobooks, where personality meets chemistry, and quiet becomes everything. Subscribe, like, and follow for the next story. Also, my short novel, Men Being Too Intimate. The Time We Had, I Saw You First, One Night Only, are now available on Kindle Unlimited. You'll find the link in the description. Please do have a read.